Hello, Bill and Allison. It's Matt with Cooler. Allison, it was good visiting with you. I'm going to walk around the house again and point out some pieces, and then we can get together. So what I've heard so far is that the timbers are the priority, the darker timbers throughout. Underneath here, that's what I call the soffit, underneath the porches and the eaves, and the soffit does not necessarily need to be touched. However, there is an area that I'd like to point out. So as we walk around, I'm just taking note of everything. When I spec out a home's exterior, I look for two things. One is aesthetics, and the main one to me is integrity. So Allison, I pointed out this a little bit. Bill, I'm just pointing this out. Right there, you can see in the middle of the shot is some failing chink. And we're gonna notice it a little bit more on the south aspect where this home gets a lot of sun exposure throughout the year. That chinking is an integrity piece. And I just want to note that because that's where moisture and small insects, pests can kind of enter. So yes, on the timbers, on the decks, you know, we are seeing weathering, we are seeing some dry logs. If I was to do a water test in this area, I'm very certain that this would be absorbed by the wood versus penetrating. So the product that has been on here to me looks like a penetrating oil, which usually builds up a resistance to water and still allows that wood aesthetic that this house certainly has, and it's just absolutely beautiful. We talk about the decks. Allison, you and I talked about these pretty significantly. These are iPay decks. It's an African hardwood. And I'll show you a place where it's covered and how it looks in comparison to these. There are different levels that we can do for finishing. All the protection generally comes with an application of a hardwood oil, and that does need to be maintained. So you can see in here, now that it's a little bit more protected, how bright and a rich tone that this wood can provide. Up in here, here's another area where chinking is failing, and we pointed this out together on site. Some of these runs would need to be re-pulled and re-chinked, and we can get some color matching going. And if we do seal up these boards at any time in the future, we can take this stain that we would use and stain over the chink, since it is such a normal similar tone. I was trying to determine, it looks like this has been stained in the past. There's no integrity issues with staining over chink. It is more of an aesthetic. And so we have some clients that choose to do it and some that choose not to do it. There's a step there. Caught me off guard. Okay, a couple more things as we go around. I'll try to keep this as short as possible, but I'm also lingering because your yard is beautiful. I really enjoy hanging out here. All the windows are metal cladded, so unless you wanted a color change, there's nothing to address their integrity or aesthetics. What am I going to show you? Underneath this deck, this is a really great representation of protected iPay. So this has some examples. As this polishes up with oils, this would pop a little bit more. But if we do talk about refinishing, we're going to re-sand these woods, and more of this color would just pop. So refinishing really is aesthetics. Under here, we've got some soffit tongue and groove area. And as we track out farther along this porch, we'll see these boards deteriorate. Now, this is not necessarily an integrity piece because this is underneath the other iPay deck. And so it doesn't, there's always going to be cracks, but at one point in time, these boards were all tight, like inside that. So I just wanted to point that out. This might be an area where we choose to address. And again, it is aesthetics for the most part. We see some boards loosening up and starting to fall down. So maybe those are just secured up and we're good to go for now. But if this was to be addressed, we could gain some of the aesthetics and conformity back, but not all of it without replacing boards. And then we do see some of these skirts and fascia boards around the upper deck. The corner boards are starting to separate a little bit, which is just an indication of weathering. and some dryness. As far as the gray goes for the home, I was pointing some pieces out to Allison on site as far as indications of weathering. See if it comes through on here. This corner is just one of the east and southeast, so this is going to get hit harder than other aspects of the home. It's not really coming through in the video, but here I can see a little bit additional weathering. My assumption is that a water test would show that there is not a seal on some of these boards. I'll do that before we get out of here. And then up there's a little integrity issue. That looks like it's the actual wood splitting, not chink. But right below it, there is some chink that is failing. And again, it's a south aspect that gets hit with sun. So that's a quick walk around. As I round the corner up front, there's nothing else that really grabs my attention. Underneath these decks could be an aesthetic piece. This does not have that T&G. So a little bit of weathering underneath, that's the iPay again. And if we wanted to seal that up, we might prevent some of that discolorization from continuing. However, it really is an aesthetic desire versus integrity. There's a fairly weathered board right there. That is definitely not sealed any longer. And I think my microphone had just changed. So hopefully all the words came through, and this is a pretty succinct video. I'm also going to use this for putting our bids together. So there's some interesting aspects to gain on the house, and I really appreciate the opportunity. We'll talk to you soon.